Isn't it funny how you watch some episodes and then forget them, almost like that? Overdue Doctor Who review, and this time it's time to talk about The Long Game. This is an episode that I think, having now revisited it for the first time in a long time, because it's just not an episode I felt any particular desire to ever really watch again. I think I've seen it maybe twice prior to this, and I don't even know how long it's been. I think it might actually be a bit over-maligned, if I'm being honest. Now, I'm not about to defend the episode, but it's not so much bad as it is frustrating. It is a frustrating viewing experience for a number of reasons. So, the first big thing, and I'm not really going to recap the plot. If you're watching a review of something this old, this late, I'm assuming you've already seen it. And I'm going to get into spoilers right off. So, there are elements and there are ideas that are really good and then underutilized or underexplored. So, Simon Pegg as the editor. I think he's a great villain. And I also love how his attitude and his interactions with characters feeds into an idea that exists in this episode that is almost not explored at all. Because the whole notion of a society where broadcasting a lie is actually a crime, lying about who you are is a crime, and yet the people at the top are not themselves honest, even though they are enforcing honesty with forcibly with everybody else. That is a concept ripe for satire, for sort of deeply looking at the relationship that as a society we have with the truth, the relationship that the news has with the truth, and the supposed objectivity that gets enforced but is still in some way subjective, still pushing an agenda, if only by what gets emphasis and what gets omitted. Like, there's so much to work with there. It just kind of skims past the surface of it so that we can get a monster in the ceiling. It's really frustrating, because I do think that idea is something that could yield a great satirical episode. It's the kind of thing that I would really love to see Big Finish tackle, if they haven't already. Because it's the kind of broader, more philosophical idea that, I don't mean to knock Doctor Who episodes, but they explore those ideas more often in Big Finish than they do in the actual show at this point, which is not intended as a knock on the show. I think that's actually more of a function of time. Most Big Finish stories are about 2 hours. That's the proper amount of time to explore something like that, as opposed to about 45 minutes, which is all this has. But even if it only had 45 minutes, if it had trimmed off some of the fat, it could have explored these ideas more deeply. So what is some of the fat? Well, there's Adam, for one thing. And I've talked about him before. Like, I don't hate Adam functionally, because I understand why he's there in terms of making the point that Rose's ability to deal with this and act appropriately is not universal, and that someone who appeared to be clever by today's standards, throw them into this situation and they can be really dumb, really self-centered, just really have crap not go well. So I think that was a decent way to sort of bolster Rose a little bit. Not that Rose was coming across as not a good fit for the Doctor, but it's nice to sort of emphasize well, he can't just take anybody, because some people screw this up badly. So I get that, but by devoting so much time of this story to him and to making that point, which again, I'm not entirely sure was a point that needed to be made. It's not an invalid one to make, I suppose, especially with the revival, but because the story has to share time with that is the kind of thing that is eating up time, as opposed to deep diving into these concepts, into these ideas. And it is such a shame, because I love anytime the editor is something's fictional, or he's who's that? Wait, I don't know something? It's so nice not to know something. And, the smugness of that. Or when he's talking to Suki and he's like going through her biography, he's like, liar, liar. And I love those interactions, and I love what that implies about this society and this structure and how it works. And we just don't get much out of it. The Doctor himself is not a little... I'm not going to say he's off, but this is probably, I'd say, the most underwhelming performance that Eccleston gives. It's not a bad performance, but he doesn't get a lot to work with. He's just kind of like, oh, things are a little off. And he doesn't have as many moments to shine as he usually does, because Eccleston was definitely a Doctor who, whenever there was any moment for him to like grab and get a good beat out of, he would. And there just isn't much for him to work with here. I think my favorite moment with him is Rose turning to him and say, is there trouble? And he just goes, yeah. And he smiles like, oh, there it is. Oh, it's gone. Like, that was his one very brief shining moment. Although I will say, I do like the nature of sort of the arc between him and the reporter, whose name I've now forgotten, sort of makes my point. This episode is really hard to hold on to a lot of the details of. It's quite forgettable. But the one who helps him at the end. And Kathika. So, I think that's it. I might have it wrong. I'm going with that. So, I do like that interaction that the Doctor doesn't, save the satellite. He gets one person to wake up to what they should have been doing the whole time, and then they make that step. And I actually like that, and I kind of wish Doctor Who would do that more often. Modern Doctor Who has a tendency to overemphasize the Doctor sort of finagling things so that the enemy's plan defeats itself. I don't think, well, maybe it happens more often than I think. It's just in episodes that I wish were better. I guess I'll find out as I go through these things. But my feeling is that it's not as common that he finagles things so that the humans actually do what they were supposed to be doing and elevates them. I mean, he lectures humans a lot. And I don't mean Eccleston specifically, I mean the Doctor in general. Lectures humans a lot about what they should be doing. And he does a little bit here, but I don't feel like he gives as much of an encouragement and a sense of they came to the conclusion of what they should be doing with a little help, but at least partially on their own. I think a lot of times it feels just much more, oh, they realize the Doctor's right, and they just do what he wants them to do. And this, it felt a little more earned in terms of her own coming to a sense of things. And I liked her as well. She was a good presence. There's also, I'm going to highlight something here because I've been meaning to make a video about this sort of thing happening, and I still might. But if I do, I need to remember to use this as an example. So one of the things that will often drive me crazy is when I make a complaint about something and people defend it because there's a narrative justification for it. So what I'll cite here is, especially compared to the last time that we went off-world, well, off-world like in orbit around Earth, way far off-world, but last time we went off-world, it was for the end of the world. And we got all these fantastic creatures, this wonderful look, and a sense of scope and scale to the universe, because even though we haven't left the orbit of Earth, we're seeing all these wonderful and amazing aliens and cool concepts and different cultures. We're getting a taste of all that. None of that here. Here we're on a satellite with a bunch of people acting like it's modern day Earth. And I know that that's part of what cues the Doctor off to something's wrong, but that's kind of my point. Narratively, they justify that the Jagrafess has manipulated things to cut off humanity from other societies. They do justify the lack of anything other than humans, but that doesn't change the fact that this feels just like an underwhelming setting because it's all humans, especially when our other point of comparison was the end of the world. It's still a step down. It's still something that makes the show feel less than it could have been, even though you can justify it narratively. So that's one of the things that drives me crazy. Explaining why something is the way it is doesn't mean that suddenly that thing works. So Yeah, so there's that going on, and I do suspect the logistical reason why there are no aliens in this is because they couldn't afford them, and they sunk their budgets elsewhere in other episodes. So I get the logistical reasons as well, but it's just one of those things that annoys me. So I'm not sure what else there is to say. Really, I'm glad that they ditch Adam by the end of this, and they should, because he served his purpose. I have sometimes wondered if it would be, probably too much time has passed now, it's too far to call back to, but I always did kind of wonder, would he turn up again, like, I don't know, when Harriet Jones turned up again, there was part of me that wondered, is he going to be like a science consultant for her? Or, I've seen some people propose that he comes back flat out as a villain because he's got a grudge against the Doctor, and that might be a little much. But I've always kind of wondered about the possibilities of bringing him back. Probably won't happen at this point. I'm not sure I would want it to. And I'm not even necessarily going to call it a missed opportunity, because I don't think you need to bring him back. But, I don't know. I wonder sometimes. I think that's about it, really. It's an episode with potential in its core concepts and in some of the performances, but at the end of the day, it feels like filler. The monster feels like filler. It's like the epitome of insert monster here. They do way too much build-up for what is literally just a mouth in the ceiling. And, the whole thing just feels like, well, we need to seed a few things that are going to pay off at the end of the series. What's a story that will allow us to do that? Well, here. It's functional. That's what the long game is. The long game is functional. And that's kind of it. But yeah, not as bad as I kind of remember it, but a bit more frustrating than I remember it. But in any case, that'll wrap up my thoughts on The Long Game. What do you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. There's a whole bunch of buttons and links and stuff down there as well. Check them out if you feel like it, including the Patreon link. So, if you want to take a look at those, go for it. If not, don't worry about it, because remember, folks, you're the council and I just run the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.